All right, well, we're beginning chapter 1. Let me get my notes up here real quick, and we'll be ready to go here. Got to kind of coordinate things. My book and my notes up here, so it just takes me a few minutes here. There we go. All right, so chapter 1 is Introduction to Lifespan and Development. And they do start out with an interesting kind of parallel lives. They compare Ted Kaczynski with Alice Walker. It's interesting because Ted Kaczynski seemed to have everything set for him. He went to Harvard. I think he was 16 when he went to Harvard, and a really smart man. Finished his PhD, teaching at Berkeley. Had all these things put together and ended up becoming one of the most famous serial killers, the Unabomber. And then we have Alice Walker, who was born in poverty, who ended up being such a great contributor, winning a Pulitzer Prize for her book called The Color Purple, a film that Oprah Winfrey had played in. So, when we think about this, what caused Ted Kaczynski to turn out how he did, and Alice Walker to turn out the way she did? That kind of is the crux in many ways about why people are interested in lifespan development. Again, developmental psychology has its own field, its own branch of psychologists are just doing this and nothing else. And so the question is, why do we study lifespan development? What are the reasons for it? You see, there's 3 reasons that most people venture into this. Many times because you're forced to. You've got to take it to finish your degree. But besides that, there's also that interest in it. So there's 3 reasons why. 3 major reasons. One, why somebody studies lifespan development, and that is to help us guide our children. Another one is to understand your own history. What made you the way you are? And then, what's to come? What are some things that I can expect in the next 10 years or 20 years to be able to plan for that? It is, it begins on page 4 in your text in the 16th edition, and it goes over, they talk about some different components of lifespan, different perspectives, life expectancy, the development is lifelong, it's multidimensional, it's multidirectional, it's plastic. They go through each of these different components in the text, which are really quite interesting as you read through them. I have a brief video, so I can't belabor the point too much, but there's some things that I think are quite interesting. They also discuss contemporary concerns over on page 7, health and well-being, mind and body, parent and education, which are quite interesting. Socioeconomic status has a tremendous effect on lifespan and development. You may not necessarily have thought so, but what we find is that individuals in lower socioeconomic status, those individuals, especially when we look at language acquisition, reading in specific, that those particular children are not exposed to language. People in lower socioeconomic status are not exposed to language as much as they would be in a middle class or middle class and the 1%ers. And so what we see is that just based off of socioeconomic status, that these children here, the lower socioeconomic status, are forever penalized with a limited vocabulary based off of that experience. That's why Head Start started. Head Start began. Was to kind of help those children catch up. And it's had mixed reviews. I personally feel that Head Start has done really well for a lot of children in some research, and other research has showed that it's not been quite as effective as it could be. I think without it, it would be disastrous, and so there's certainly some strengths with it. But that's one component when we're looking at contemporary concerns. Let's see, I'm just looking over my notes here. Bear with me for a moment. Looking at my notes. Trying to make this a little bit more interactive with you all. Next thing they talk about is the nature of development. This begins the second component of it. And in this part, as you venture into the nature of development, we're talking about biological, cognitive, socio-emotional processes, which is, by the way, is how the text is broken up throughout the semester. You'll see each age period is broken up into those three components. Sometimes they're together, sometimes they're on separate chapters. But before you venture this, I want you to think about, what do you have in common with Mike Tyson, Geronimo, Angelina Jolie, and Benjamin Franklin? What do you have in common with them? Of course, they're all humans, but what else do you have in common with them? As you think about that, you'll see that this text really addresses that. And the one thing that we all have in common is that we all develop in a certain sequence, for the most part. We have certain milestones that we go through as we develop. Let me see what else is important before you venture into this component of this particular chapter. Developmental issues. Three major issues that are debated over and over and over and over again throughout developmental psychology. One is nature versus nurture. Nature is what you're born with, your genetic makeup. Nurture is your environment. And so always the question is, which has the biggest influence on development? Like language acquisition, is it more nature or is it more nurture? Which one had the biggest impact on it? We already talked about socioeconomic status, so that's the nurture aspect of it. But there may be some other things that one will look at. Stability and change, that is how consistent are we in our development. McCrae and Costa, they're both personality theorists who say that we are made up of 5 components of our personality. There's openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism, those 5 components. And they would say that those 5 components never change. They may minimize, they may become more accentuated. For example, conscientiousness we see is really high in centenarians, people that live over 100 years of age. But they would say they're continuous. And so that is one approach, right? That there's stability. The other approach is that there's change. Other theorists would say, no, that's not true. You know, that personality actually changes as we mature, as we grow older. Neither is right. It's just part of the debate. Then the last one they talk about is continuity and discontinuity, and that is whether or not things are in stages. Like Piaget has got his 5 stages. Excuse me, his 4-stage theory. Freud's got 5 psychosexual stages of development. Some theories don't have any stages, like Vygotsky. It is kind of zones of proximal development. It doesn't really have stages to it. And so that's kind of another approach to it. So we have continuity and discontinuity. They have a nice example in your text over on page 19 of the 16th edition, where we've got a seed, a little seed in the ground, and then a little twig, and then a little bush, and then a tree. Kind of a continuous process. And discontinuous would be the caterpillar turning into the butterfly. Just another example of that approach. Then the last portion of the chapter that I want you to really kind of focus on, and this is where the rubber meets the road, for lack of a better expression. These are all the different theories of development. You've got Freud, you have Erikson, you have Piaget, you have Vygotsky, you've got behavioral and social cognitive approach with Skinner, Bandura, Conrad Lawrence, ethological theorists, Bronfenbrenner, which is a cool theory. I like him. I like his theory a lot. It's a little bit complex when you look at it, but he's got a lot of healthy approaches to it. And then the last one is the eclectic theoretic orientation. None of you guys can pick that. Sorry, you got to pick one of the other ones, because what you're going to do is you're going to apply again this particular theorist to all these vignettes down throughout this semester. And I think that is it. There is some information on research, but in the regular classroom, I really don't brush on research too much. We have a class on research methodology that I teach, and so I don't want to spend too much time belaboring that point. All right, class, so that is Chapter 1. Let's move on and try to do a video for Chapter 2.